Hello, it's Elise Lunan, host of Pulling the Thread, and today I'm talking to psychotherapist Meg Josephson about the Fawn Response, which will probably bring many of you to your knees in an act of self recognition. Meg is the author of the instant New York Times bestseller, Are You Mad at Me? How to Stop Focusing on What Others Think and Start Living for You. I am not surprised that this book and Meg's approach has struck such a nerve in the culture. I certainly relate and suspect many of you will too. Today, we're talking about the fawn response that Meg writes about and helps her clients with. You're likely familiar with the other fear responses: fight, flight, freeze, and perhaps faint. But the fawn response has a lot to do with people pleasing tendencies, with a desire to be liked, and with a desire to keep the peace in a given situation. If you worry about disappointing other people, if you worry about other people being mad at you, if you're like me and your first thought is often, am I in trouble? You may be prone to the fawn response. As we talk about today, the fawn response is really a protective and wise strategy that many of us have learned and used to keep ourselves safe. And at the same time, we may have gotten to the point where we are overusing it, and we may want to choose something else for ourselves and our relationships. So, Meg breaks down what she sees as the 5 archetypes or behavioral patterns typically associated with the fawn response, because this can look different for different people. And we also talk about what underlies these archetypes and how, in recognizing ourselves in them, we can also begin to expand into new ways of being and into new relationship patterns. Sounds like a good plan, right? So let's get into it. It's really nice to meet you, and congrats on the success of your book.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's always thrilling to have something that's
Yeah.
clearly so resonant, understandably resonant in the culture.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this feeling of like when you're sharing something so personal. There, my experience was I was writing it for me. I was writing it for a past version of myself. And I felt, even while writing it, I felt pretty alone in the feeling. I knew it would resonate. Like I see this feeling in my private practice. I know other people feel it, but there was still this voice that was like, nah, just you. No,
Yeah.
no one else feels that. So I was really comforted by the resonance of, wow, other people do
Everyone
think this
else.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, fawning is having a moment. And it's always fun to read a book that's mostly grounded in stories
Yeah.
and practices. I love an academic book, but not everyone does, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you never know what the entry point is for the reader. I would hate for someone to turn away from it because it felt intimidating or too clinical. So I was really mindful of that while writing it. I'm like, I want to share research and grounded information, but I don't know who's reading this, and I want it to feel accessible to whoever's picking
Yeah.
it up. So that's a
Yeah.
tough balance, though, because we don't, people are at different points in their process. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm sure, like every other reader of the book, I found myself, nodding along and diagnosing myself. And, I've definitely had that conversation with my therapist and I have this right reaction to getting any sort of text where someone wants to speak
yeah.
to me. It's always like, am I in trouble? I mean, it's wild. I'm a 40, how old am I? 46? Something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm 47. I don't know. But I'm like, what year is
You're
it?
like
But
2026 minus.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's a recurrent thought for me, mostly in not so much with my parents, but more sort of within the culture where it's like
Yeah.
I've disappointed someone. So and I recognize like that's both highly abnormal and also incredibly so common,
Yeah.
right? Like you're naming something that I think is so common and yet previously not discussed that it's like, well, I thought we all operated like this, right?
Totally. And so much of it is happening in the privacy of our minds. So I think that
Yeah.
adds to the loneliness. Like someone may look very confident and cool and collected in their relationships, but then what's happening internally, we're not let in on that. Or maybe we are, maybe the other person, I love your cats, just like full.
Zooming around. Yes. Four. I have four.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I love that.
Yes.
I actually like your point of age because it's a timeless feeling because I think for many of us younger part of us that has learned to be hypervigilant and learned to be scanning the environment. Do they like me? What do they think of me? That part of us is always there, whether we're 25, 45, 85. And that to me is the beautiful part of this work is creating a relationship with that part of ourselves, knowing that it's not that they or this part is not going anywhere. We can kind of, be friends with them in some ways.
Yeah. It's also, I think, when we talk about, and I learned the fear responses in addition to the ones that you name, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I also learned faint. I know it's maybe not quite as discussed, or people feel like it's too close to maybe freeze, but that's like the playing dead version
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But I think that what is also important to normalize, and that these are all ways in which we engage with life, and maybe we each have sort of a tendency, mine is certainly fawn, but that the underlying fear which drives us into this behavior is just part of life.
Yeah.
And we all are going to respond, particularly now, right, where we're dealing with all these poly crises.
Yeah.
It's just, and confronted with it daily, right? So it's not even just like AI and the climate and ice and it's the economy, whatever it is. It's just
Yeah.
like, and then we read it, we see it all day. And so these are sort of this wise patterns for trying to manage our own anxiety.
Totally.
Yeah. And you see how
So
it shows up
wise.
sort of, right. So wise, right? Like, how do I calm myself down? And you can understand too how these responses get so aggravated in a culture where you're like, well, I better not get fired, right? So
I can't
my
afford to get fired. I have to
right,
I have to appease. I have to, abandon
placate, yeah,
myself to keep the security. And that's where I think the nuance of the fawn response is so important where I think we've kind of overcompensated in mainstream psychology, though just the way we talk about it in our culture of like, oh, just set a boundary or just say no. And there's nuance. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it's
yeah,
unsafe to. And the fawn response is a very protective, brilliant, wise to your word strategy to keep us safe. Sometimes we need it, whether it's to be safe, whether it's to get a paycheck, whatever it may be to survive within our systems. It becomes hurtful to ourselves and to our relationships when we're doing it all the time, when we're doing it with our loving partner or with our best friend that we've known since childhood and they're very safe. When we're people pleasing in all relationships when we don't need to be, that's when it, takes a toll on us.
yeah. It's wild. I mean, I don't want to take the conversation deep into this direction too, but even just thinking about the tragedy of Renee Good
Yeah.
and her, like she elicited
Yep.
a fawn response in the moments before she was shot in the face 3 times, right? She
Yep.
said, like, it's okay, dude, I'm not mad at you. Like, I'm
That's it. I was about
friendly.
to say the fact that you said
Yeah.
those words, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. And sometimes it's still not enough. Like it's
Yeah.
not enough against the oppressive forces that we are working against. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very real.
It's super real. And I think that, and so again, just like caveating before we dive into this, that even as you will invariably diagnose yourself sort of in the pages of your book and in this conversation and be like, oh my God, I do that all the time. And we can choose to do something different.
Yeah.
And it's a completely understandable response. And it's I think very relieving. I mean, there was that piece that really punctured the mainstream in the New York Times in terms of how women respond to sexual trauma. It can be very reassuring or confirming that you're not necessarily collaborating with your abusers or asking for whatever might be happening to you. You're just trying to stay alive, right? It is a way to mitigate the threat, to minimize harm. And too often, and for until the last 5 years, maybe we've been caught holding that bag as though we are sort of co-creators or co-participants in whatever is happening to us because we didn't fight or we didn't run or we didn't,
we couldn't
pass
have.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what can be confusing about the Fawn Response is it's out of, if we're looking at just those 4, but even I think faint would fall into this as well. Mm-hmm. Of those other, the fight, flight, freeze, if you were to do that at work or in a setting that it wouldn't be socially acceptable, there's some like punishment for that. If you're fighting, flighting, freezing at work, or in a situation where someone is trying to control you, that's going to compromise your safety even more. But the Fawn Response is the only one that we're applauded for. Oh, you're so easy. You're so agreeable. Oh, you're such a good girl. There's such a conditioned, socialized element to it as well, which differs highly from the other threat responses. So it's very reinforced.
Yeah. I'm assuming, and I don't know if there's research, that fawn is more commonly practiced by women, although not exclusively, certainly. Whereas what do we want? Like, what's the culturally mandated fear response for men? Fight?
I would say fawn is interesting where I think it is, I see it all the time in men, but I think it presents differently. Where I think because the Fawn Response is about finding safety by sometimes being a chameleon or silencing yourself, I think for women, if I'm generalizing, it tends to be more active, like, oh, I'm so sorry, over apologizing, whatever you think, it's more of an active approach. I find that for, again, generalizing, for men, it tends to be more silencing emotions, which is true for women as well, but blending in with the male, the group that they're trying to accommodate to. And I see that in my practice. If it's a closeted gay man and he's changing how he's speaking to fit in with the super masculine group that he's with, like changing how he speaks or how he talks. And I think it appears differently, but most importantly, what I'm saying here is it's every person, it's different. It can look so different. It can be more active. It can be more shutting down in some ways. But the thread is the same, which is I find safety through pleasing you. I can't be safe until I know you like me. I can't know that I'm good until we're good. So that will look different based on the identities that you hold and the spaces that you're entering. But I definitely think it's more socialized for women. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, you have to wonder too. We're recording this in the days after the men won the gold in men's hockey. And you have to wonder how many players, I know 5 players did not go to the White House. I don't know if they did it for political reasons or not, or in solidarity with the women. But you have to wonder how many of those boy/men were, unable to, did not know how to respond in that moment, versus those who were like, this is so great to be partying with Kesh Patel. Oh, so embarrassing. My husband's a huge hockey fan, and he was so humiliated
It's so
by,
mortifying. Yeah.
so mortified by his
Yeah.
support. It's such a bummer. It's like,
Oh,
God,
I
it's not that
know.
hard.
I
God.
know. Such a bummer.
Ugh.
And oh my gosh, it speaks to such an important piece of it. Like when someone is in power and it's so easy to collapse and fawn under them because there's this control thing happening. Even like if you're on the phone with Trump and you agree with him or you don't, there's some fear, oh, this person's in power over me. That can also mess with the phone response of like, I need to please this authoritative figure. This
Totally.
authoritative figure can't be mad at me or whatever it may be. So, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that
Well,
was
corporations across the country are
yeah,
fawning, right? As a mass
totally,
action.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally,
At the beginning, you sort of outline, I would call them archetypes almost.
yeah.
The caregiver, the lone wolf, et cetera. Can you sort of take us through I guess you would call them behavioral patterns
Yeah,
that people might relate to?
totally. And I wrote these archetypes to showcase just how different the fawn response can present amongst all of us, whether it was in your early environment, whether it's in adulthood. And I really view these archetypes not diagnostically, and even, I don't view the fawn response diagnostically either. But to your exact point, it's a pattern. It's showcasing, it's putting words to a behavioral pattern that we have that has kept us safe. And sometimes we need it, sometimes we don't. And we're cultivating awareness to recognize the instances where we're using it when we don't need to, so that we can, shed that pattern. So you just want me to go through and kind of give a
Yeah.
few sentence
Yeah.
overview?
I can prompt you too if you want, but yes.
No, it's
I know
okay.
you're like,
I
I
should
wrote
have
that
him.
book a long
Yeah, I
time
should
ago.
have. I should have him top of mind. So another thing just to preface is you might resonate with all of them. You might resonate with four of them. You might resonate with one of them. There's meant to be overlap. They're not personality types to cling to, but rather just, reflective prompts. So the peacekeeper is the first one. Well, just one of them. That the first one that comes to my head. They're not ranked. There's no hierarchy to this.
This is the Enneagram 9 for
Yeah.
people who love the
Don't
Enneagram.
attach to the order in which I'm presenting these. So the peacekeeper is really focused on how is the harmony of the environment? How's the harmony of this relationship? Whether that is, presents itself in a lot of hypervigilance. So just like scanning people's facial expressions and did they laugh at my joke? And are my parents fighting? What can I do to make them their relationship more harmonious? So this peacekeeper quality, I think, presents itself in all of the archetypes, but the peacekeeper is, I think, unique in that that's their main sense of value. Is my sense of self comes from keeping the peace, however that may look in each situation. And then another one is the performer. So I actually loved writing this because I think of like someone said this quote. And I remember some comedian said this quote of people often ask, "Oh, you're a comedian? Were your parent were?" Damn it, I already messed up. You're a comedian. Were you depressed growing up? And the comedian said, "You should really be asking, were your parents depressed?" Because
Right.
how is humor be used to soothe the tension at home growing up? Doesn't have to be the case, certainly for every comedian, and not for every performer archetype. But the performer really finds safety in putting on a bit of a show. And whether that's through humor, whether that's through, orchestrating conversation so that the other people are connecting, there's this sense of performing, but not in a fake. It doesn't mean you're being fake. It just means like you're really on all the time. And the performer often feels like, and this is true, I think, for all the archetypes, but especially performer, no one really knows me because no one can really get to know me beneath this character that I'm putting on for people.
Mhm.
And again, that's true for all of, I think, the fawn response, which is it keeps people at a distance. If we're only showing people the most perfect curated version of ourselves, how can people know our fears and our needs and our preferences because we're just saying, yeah, yeah, whatever you think. And no, that's totally fine. But then inside we're resentful and upset and angry, but we're not able to express it ever. So
Yeah.
the performer feels that a lot. I'll just stick with the P's. The perfectionist is another one, which, the perfectionist finds safety in often overachieving, in just appearing and being perceived as perfect. And I think with perfect also is good, being perceived as good, as a good person, and will put a lot of value in how much external validation they're getting. I'm trying to think of other ways relatable ways it comes up. Oh, and just like really hard on themselves because if you're perfect, there's nothing to criticize, right?
Right.
Ideally. So they're kind of
Yeah.
staying ahead of the criticism. That's sort of the core belief. I need to be perfect to be loved. No one's going to love me if I'm messy or, but and that's also very lonely. None of what is perfect doesn't exist, as we know. And what does it mean to be perfect? It means we're concealing humanity within ourselves.
Mhm.
I think a good,
Two C's and an L.
yeah, perfect. I'm going to segue to the caretaker because I think it's a good segue from perfectionist, which is my values in being helpful. I can't, the caretaker finds safety in self-sacrifice. And this doesn't mean that if you're healing this part of you, you're never helping anyone, but it's coming from a different place. The caretaker finds value in being seen as helpful, even if they're resentful about it, even if they don't actually mean it, they don't want to do it. It's coming from a place of being perceived as nice as opposed to true, genuine compassion. Doesn't mean that there isn't genuine desire to help, but it's coming from that people pleasy place. So the caretaker, may have had to caretake for their parents or a disabled sibling growing up, or how it can present a lot of different ways in childhood, but how it presents in adulthood is often being drawn to a partner that you kind of need to mother or parent in some ways, or being drawn to someone that it mimics that dynamic that you experienced growing up. I should have done that for all of them of how what you're kind of attracted to from that, but
Yeah.
that's just
People
that
can
can
use their, yeah.
yeah, use your imagination, but that's what about this feels familiar. We like what's familiar because we say, "Oh, I've seen this before. I know how to do this." So if we're with someone, if we had a very critical caregiver, unconsciously, keyword unconsciously, because we're not trying to, we're going to be drawn to someone that's critical because we think I know how to act with this person. And then there's a deeper belief that says, oh, if I can be good enough for this person, it'll fix the original wound that I have, the core wound. Of course, it doesn't work, but that's the unconscious gravitational pull. And when we can become aware of that, that's when we can start to break it. But
Well, so just to retread on the other piece, so like the performer might want to, I mean, I think we all know those people who can't be intimate or serious, right? Like they
yeah,
turn to humor to avoid everything feels uncomfortable.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
imagine like any sort
Vulnerability is
of,
very scary. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that would make sense to me as like the adult, uh, the adult partner seeking part of that.
totally. Yeah.
And then what was the first one?
Peacekeeper.
Peacekeeper.
Peacekeeper, yeah. I would say, I mean, as I said, they all kind of overlap. I think Peacekeeper, I, I just get a sense of this quote type as like, I don't know you. Like, I almost know you, but I can't quite get my grip on you. Like, I can't feel you here with me because there's just this distance because your focus is on harmony, not depth.
Yes. And like extreme avoidance, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Right?
avoidance of all of them, all of these,
Yeah.
avoidance of conflict, is a huge, huge theme because we think, oh, if I'm in conflict with someone, there's no going back. The relationship is ruined. This has been such a big thing I've had to work through to the point where when I got my dog, this is insanely embarrassing, but it's just true. I honestly was scared he was mad at me. I was like, if I'm like training my dog, I was like, oh my gosh, does he not? I didn't give him a treat because he didn't sit. Are we okay now? Do you think that like the relationship is over? There was this permanency in my mind. It's such a silly example, but it applies to human relationships too. Of there's no going back. Like we can't recover from this because we probably didn't witness repair growing up. We never
Right.
saw a coming together, an acknowledgement after the conflict. I know for me, it was very explosive, very rageful, and then it was never talked about again. And that happened pretty much daily. And that's so
Mm.
confusing for a child because we learn it's my fault. And
Right.
I'm the problem here. So yeah,
Mm.
I'm pivoting all over, but I know I have
No, it's
two
okay.
left.
People can track it. We have
Yeah.
chameleon and lone wolf.
Yes. So let me start with I'll start with the chameleon because I view lone wolf as a little different from the others. So chameleon finds safety in blending in, as the name suggests, and will kind of morph themselves to fit whoever they're with, their opinions, their preferences, maybe even how they dress, how they talk, and can just leave them feeling like, I don't know who I am. I actually have no idea what my true personality is, which is also very lonely. All of these there's a loneliness to all of these. But on the outside, it may appear on the surface, wow, this person is just like me. We get along so well. But the person being the chameleon feels a bit lost, a bit like they're betraying themselves every time they morph. I'm trying to, let's think, adult.
Well, it's a little bit like maybe those hockey players, or when you are participating in a
Yeah.
culture that you're like, I'm so deeply uncomfortable. But what was striking in reading the book too about chameleon, and I can understand this deeply, is that when you are so other oriented, which so many of us are, right? Particularly when you're managing these external environments
Yeah.
growing up, trying to peacekeep or caretake or whatever it may be, you lose contact, or maybe you never develop contact with that internal ballast or who you are, what you
Yeah.
want. I mean, you write about this a lot. So I would imagine for a chameleon, there's this feeling of like uneasiness and also, but I don't have anything to replace it with.
Totally. Yeah.
Like I just don't, I feel disconnected and confused
Yeah.
and like, who's my mom? What duck am I following? You know?
Totally. And that almost is that becomes the sense of self is finding it in other people, finding what other people are thinking and doing. And I found personally that chameleon aspect comes out the most in adulthood because as a child, I think it's really laid out what quote success is or being quote good is, get good grades and maybe if you're on this path, go to college and whatever. It's more laid out. But I think once we're adults, we now need to decide, well, what do I want to do with my time? What do I think? What are my opinions? What are my passions? And when we haven't had connection with our inner world for 2 decades, those questions are very scary. There's no anchor. It's hard to tether ourselves when we have found safety in hyper focusing on the external and being completely disconnected from the internal. So, yeah, that's definitely a huge, huge piece of chameleon.
Yeah. Before we get to the lone wolf, too, one thing that I think is so consistent across this pattern which you also explore, but there's this over empowerment, right? These big little kids, I'm sure many can relate to that feeling where I definitely felt this way, where I had a lot of power to, or at least that was my perception, to manage the energy of a room or to bring things into concordance or create resonance.
Yeah.
And that's theoretically all well and good, except you grow up with a very distorted sense of how much responsibility you have for the feelings of
Yeah.
other people, which is core to your book and your work, that you're responsible for how they feel, which is wild when you say it, but I think a deep belief for many of us, and that you can control the environment to ensure everyone feels
Yes.
good, also a wild belief. And that it's your responsibility. And it brings with it also this extreme self-consciousness, which is ironic because you spend your whole life focusing on not your own interior experience, but like, how do I manage my interior experience
Yeah.
by managing all of you?
Yes. It's exhausting.
It's
You use the
exhausting.
perfect word. I love the word distorted for that because we're overestimating how much control we have. And oh my gosh, how tiring to think that we can control someone's behavior or reactions or perceptions if we can't, obviously. We can't control how we're being perceived, how someone's going to react. We can only control our own words and behaviors and reactions ourselves. But if we go through the world thinking we can control everyone, that takes such a toll on the body, which is why I think many people who find this, this work, or they reach a point where they're picking up a book about this topic, is I'm exhausted. I'm resentful. I feel like I'm giving so much and it's not being reciprocated, or I'm overthinking everything in my life, and we can't do it forever. It gets to a point where the body says no more, and whether it's showing up somatically, whether it's presenting itself in
Totally.
other ways, it's going to talk to you. It
Yeah.
definitely is. Yeah.
All right. Talk to me about the lone
Lone
wolf.
wolf. Yeah. So
Yes.
lone wolf, I was almost even a little surprised that I put it in because you might associate the other archetypes. You might associate the fawn response rooted in more anxious attachment. It's more leaning in. Are we okay? Are you mad at me? Is everything okay? But I think the lone wolf is really important. It skews more avoidant if we're speaking in attachment theory. But the lone wolf is still focused on what do people think of me, but finds safety in retreating. Because if you disappear, you can't inconvenience anyone. And if you have no needs, you can't be let down. If you're never asking for help, you can't be disappointed. And so I think that can often coincide with these more anxious behaviors because we're never sharing how we're feeling. We're never sharing our vulnerabilities or our struggles because I'll handle it. I can do it. I'll figure it out myself. There's a hyper independence to it, which is something that I think is like my greatest thing to work on in this lifetime, is just like asking for help. And it's so hard. It's hard because when you're super self-sufficient, you get good at it. It's like, well, I can count on me. I got me. So, but it's not connection. Connection is everything. So, yeah, that's the lone wolf. The lone wolf. Let's see. Let me think of presenting. Oh, the lone wolf can feel, I think, unlike the other ones, can feel very smothered very easily. They also they may not ask, "Are you mad at me?" but they're thinking it. But they're dealing with it by probably not responding, or by avoiding and shutting down, as opposed to trying to fix it right away. So the lone wolf is just, yeah, they retreat. They retreat for safety. They become small for
Mm-hmm.
safety. So yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the
No.
archetypes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I relate to components of all of them, but I definitely was like, oh, I'm a lone wolf. Like the
Yeah.
overcompetence, that resistance to help, even though I so desperately, I'm like, God, I would love to have a me for me.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mm, I
yeah,
love
I
that.
like doing that for other people and yet struggle to find that or accept that or not be disappointed in that.
Mm.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, it was self-identifying. We all love that, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
That's why I always preface it with this isn't a personality. We do love those things. We love categories. We love understanding ourselves. And these aren't meant to be personality types because they're not permanent. They're nothing is, but we're identifying something actually so that we can move through it and forward from it and detach our identity from, oh, I'm such a peacekeeper. I'm such a this. Creating some distance. Like this has protected me a lot in the past. It will continue in the future, but this is not all of me. I have enough
Yeah.
awareness and space to observe
Yeah.
it as it's happening.
And or yeah, to see the tendencies. I mean,
Yeah.
they really do. There aren't nine of them that you've outlined, but they do. I don't know how well you know the Enneagram, but they very much align with the
Yeah.
Enneagram. Like the type
Yeah.
5 would be the lone wolf, the type 2 would be the caregiver, the type 9 is the peacekeeper.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to sort of like see them in that context. The
Yeah.
performers or the perfectionist is the type 3.
Is it one or three that find safety in being good? Which one is that?
The one
Yes.
is like all about integrity.
Yes.
Yes. So
Being
that would
perceived
be
as good feels
perfectionist.
so
Yes.
fawny in
Yeah.
general. I'm like, ugh,
One,
yeah.
three. Yeah. The
Yeah.
achiever, the 3 is the achiever. So that's sort of that part of the perfectionist. Like I'll
Oh,
just go
yeah.
and win, and create sort of an island of excellence over here. Um, like the performer would be more of like the 7, like let's just get us out of these hard feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Love those
Anyway,
parallels. I love
yeah,
that.
it'd be fun. It's your next book. Just kidding.
Yeah. Perfect.
Let's talk. Let's talk about anger because obviously that's a big part of the book. And I will just preface this by saying, as I was reading the book and reading about sort of stewing and resentment, which is far more familiar to me than anger. So I want to talk about resentment as this low grade anger, but
Yeah.
also as someone who identifies with what you're putting down. My relationship with anger has been I didn't really understand it until recently how much I stuff, and I've had some experiences with actually feeling my anger in like a context-less way where I'm suddenly like, oh, I'm just full of anger, like and working with energy healers and whatnot. But what was really interesting to me too, and I felt seen in this book, is that often when I'm engaged in something, in a conversation, I can't identify in the moment. I am so self-managed and
Yeah.
I'm so cognitive that I will be furious. And I don't know that I'm furious
Yeah.
until hours, if not days after, which can be very confusing to people because I don't have like a flared rage response. It's so contained. And I can't
Yeah.
think that fast. I can't feel that fast, Meg. I don't know what it is because I'm so
Yeah.
cognitively quick, but it's a really weird experience. Do you relate to that?
Yes, me too. And I actually think that's
What is
I think
that?
that's very normal because when self-management, when being a peacekeeper, people pleasing type is familiar to you, that's so deeply embedded where it's okay if your understanding of anger comes a little later because it also it's a deep emotion that perhaps takes time to even process that this is anger because anger is saying something isn't right, something is unjust, this isn't aligning with something I feel or believe in. And sometimes because those are values, that's something so deeply embedded within us. Sometimes we don't have that space in the moment in the conversation to access that, or it's unsafe to access it. I know for me with anger, almost always will give myself a little bit of time to sit with it. Like, well, what is happening here? And once I start having like a fake argument in my head, that's when I know there's unprocessed anger. I'm like in the car saying, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's something here. But I think it's okay. That's been my experience with anger as well. I think it's a hot, tight, fiery emotion, but it's also a slow burning, can be a slow burning one. I think because we associate anger and we associate the reaction to anger as anger, you know what I mean? Like anger
As like an
itself.
eruption, like as like a conflagration, like a big conflict.
Yeah, like I think it's so important. I actually love what you're saying because let's separate anger, which is what I just said of, it's saying something isn't right here. The reaction to anger is maybe someone's yelling or slamming a door or saying something insulting. That's a reaction in the moment to anger, but that's not anger. That's the reaction to it. Anger itself is the information. And so I actually think it's warranted and appropriate that it takes a little bit of time because information takes time to come through into our bodies and into our minds. So I think it just means you're not reacting to it. You're giving it some space. I certainly have the same process where even in the moment, I could have a conversation, be like, "Oh, that was great," and then after the fact, I'm like, "Wait, what just happened?" And then like sometimes it takes days for me to process, a conversation that was didn't sit right with me or was hurtful. So
Yeah.
anger
No,
is
I
so
very much
important,
relate to
though.
that. Yeah, and it's a weird experience to then sometimes I'll be present and I'll be like, I can tell how irritated I am or upset or how violated I feel
Yeah,
or betrayed. And I don't know how to respond. And often I need to do it sort of in writing.
yeah,
But it is a weird experience. It's been very present for me. I had a falling out in the last year where it's like as it was unfolding, I couldn't figure out how I felt.
yeah,
And it took me a week or two to be like,
yeah,
wait, whoa, like for my feelings to catch up with all the rationalization and justification that my
yeah.
mind had already done.
Mm,
Because I'm so quick to be like, it's okay.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
that though, that's you mentioned something so subtle of even if there's a shift of you find yourself being even more people pleasy than you would, that could be a
Hmm.
sign that some anger is coming
Yeah.
up in the moment because you're needing to there's a part of you that believes I need to control this. Reel it in. I can't be feeling this right now. So I'm going to be like, no, 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 it's totally okay. That can often be a sign that anger is presenting itself. It just might be covered by something else, maybe covered by, you know, compliance or whatever however it's presenting. And you also mentioned, somatically, tapping into the body can feel very hard for fawners because as we've discussed, disconnecting from the body has been the go-to.
Yeah.
But
It's
even
the way
just
to go.
sensing something's off, something's changed. I feel my palms are a little sweaty, my heart is starting to race. That can just be a sign that something is happening. It's okay if you can't acknowledge it or do anything with it in the moment. Take some space and revisit it. What happened here? Close your eyes, put your phone down and just tune into even that sensation. I think is a helpful starting point without needing to figure it out or analyze it. But it's just there. Just notice that shift, which can be so hard to do, and we haven't learned how to do that. So it's very
Yeah,
challenging.
it is. And I think as like a perfectionist too, giving myself and giving ourselves some grace in terms of how we react.
Yeah.
Like the pressure that sometimes I feel to really do it right, and
Yeah.
have it not be messy and have it be so abundantly clear is
Mm-hmm.
unwarranted, or
Yeah.
just like not human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also find, and this is a persistent thing for me that I don't know if this is fun. Sorry, I'm like turning this into a personal
Oh, I love it. I
therapy
love all
appointment.
of your thoughts
But
so much.
I
Please keep
mean, so much
talking.
of my work is about goodness and women and the way
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we
yeah.
do this. And so the other thing that I find is that I have these certain, I don't know if I would call them values or needs or just hopes, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? In relationships that I don't make people pass some crazy loyalty test, but there are just
Mm-hmm.
certain lines for me.
Totally.
And it feels very weird to be like, this is the line.
Mm.
And yet, do you know what I mean? Like I
Mm-hmm.
continually am shocked by how people justify. I don't know. I get very confused. I'm
Mm.
not being specific here intentionally, but like,
Yeah. Are you saying you're
this isn't
confused
okay.
by your own lines or other people's lines?
Well, I get confused where I'm like, it's not that hard. This
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like this line is that hard. And I'm not going to
Ah,
tell you this is a line.
yeah.
I'm not going to control your behavior. And
Yep.
yet, how can you be surprised that this is a line?
Mm.
I don't know. Like,
I think
yeah,
it's I think it's good information of I'll often discuss this of like you're either getting closeness or clarity. You're either
yeah,
getting, oh, okay, this we're on the same page, we have the same values and we are both good communicators and we that it will lead to closeness. And sometimes I think with, people we may not be on the same page with or we're not able to meet each other in that way. If we can't have that closeness, we have clarity. Oh, okay, I just simply can't expect this from this person. I can't, I have to, this is more of an internal shift now. I can't change this person. I'm not going to force this to work. I instead need to let go of what I'm expecting this other person to give me or who this person is. I don't know if I'm
right.
speaking
No,
to
it
what,
is. I mean, this is the conversation in the book about where you're clarifying this idea of boundaries, which obviously gets bandied around. And while we can't set boundaries for the behavior of other people, we can set boundaries for what we ourselves will tolerate or allow, right? I mean,
yeah,
am I
yeah,
understanding that distinction?
yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess that's, and again, what I'm talking about is here's a boundary for me. That
Hmm.
boundary has been violated. Now I feel
Hmm.
bad that I have this
Yeah.
boundary that's been violated or that this is a boundary for me. And I guess what you're saying is, well, it's just really good information.
It's information. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
find, yes, I love everything you're saying. And I talk about boundaries as we certainly sometimes they're certainly to protect us and in hurtful relationships or harmful relationships. And I find for the relationships we want in our lives, they're actually a really important, necessary form of connection because they're saying to the other person, in order to be in a relationship with you long term, which I want to be, this is what I need, and I'm trusting you enough to let you in on that. I could easily not, and then I'll feel resentful, and this will be a short-term relationship because it can only go on for so long. But I find boundaries to be such a form of intimacy because you're letting the other person in on something so vulnerable. As vulnerable, there's nothing like our needs are just some of the most vulnerable things. So, and
Yeah.
yes, sometimes it's closeness, other times it's protection. It just depends on the
Yeah.
relationship, you know?
I think where I get stuck in this,
Hmm.
as I'm thinking through this,
Yeah.
is that we each don't come with our own set of sort of rules and regulations, right? Like so many of these boundaries, I think we find when they've been violated, and it's like, well, that wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And some of them feel, I mean, I'm just going to give myself away here, but like I love The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And for those who have watched the show, one of the through storylines, which is actually getting quite boring, but it's, you know, all these women going through simultaneous divorces.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this boundary. There's a line where one, Kyle Richards, she says she's not doing it anymore, but was talking to Dorit Kemsley's soon to be ex-husband PK.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were maintaining a friendship through text.
Uh,
And
mm-hmm.
that's a good example, I think, of does that need to be spoken, that's a boundary for me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
we
like
don't do
ahead of
that.
time, like
Yes.
before it even happens, do I need to
Yes.
express that line?
Yes, I think so. And then it's like,
Yeah.
is that a silly line? Is that, but I think that many of us go through
Yes.
life being like, does that need to be stated in order for me to have a legitimate feeling about it? Like, are
Yeah.
these not collective?
Oh, I know what
You know, we
I see
don't
what
go
you're
through
saying.
life
Yeah.
saying like, these are my expectations.
Right.
That like,
Right.
you're not going to talk to my
Totally.
ex-boyfriend.
Like you enter a relationship, you're like, just so you know, here are the 6 guidelines that I would like you to follow.
Yeah.
Like that is, yeah, that's very unnatural. But it's on the, once it happens, it's confusing because it's like, how did you not know that was a line? How is that not a line for you? And it's information about differences that are arising.
Yes. And I think fawners,
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and say that fawners have a really hard time saying, this feels like a really clear line.
Totally.
I'm mad at you.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
should I not be mad? I can't, like,
Yeah.
am I being restricted? Whatever.
Because to have a line, you need to be connected to what's going on
Yes.
internally, which if we have found safety in not being connected internally, it's going to be hard to know what that line is. What are the needs? That's what a line is. It's a need. It's a comfort level.
Right.
And I think even if a line is crossed in a relationship that maybe we'd even know we had that line ourselves, like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with you talking to an ex because, and I didn't even know that that was uncomfortable for me. I think it's having that conversation, even though it's already happened, we can still have that conversation. And again, same thing, clarity or closeness. We're either going to have, they're going to be receptive. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me that. What a blind spot. I had no idea. Take accountability. They're acknowledging it. Or they're defensive and, shut it down or say, what are you talking about? You're being dramatic or whatever. That's clarity. It's just information, clarity about what the other, kind of clarity about compatibility in many ways. I'm being vague
Yeah.
as well because I'm trying to
But it's a neat thing, right? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about my own life and that context, and not to call out my college roommate and my ex-boyfriend. And I love my college roommate, but our relationship definitely suffered. And there's only peace in this circumstance ultimately, but like she persisted in staying really close to my ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
And would like hop out of bed to go get pizza with him at midnight. And I just distanced myself. Like I abandoned that relationship for many years because I was like, I'm not going to make you choose.
Right.
And it's
That's
funny.
tough. That's a tricky situation to be in.
It is a tricky situation. But I think that that's also where like, if I'm identifying with this book where I'm like, I'm never going to ask you to give something up on my behalf. You have to give something up on my behalf. And maybe that's unfair.
You're speaking exactly to how I view boundaries. Of a boundary isn't, you can't go see him. If you're not allowed to do that. That's controlling the other person. A boundary is, wow, it makes me uncomfortable when my roommate sees him. I'm not able to spend as much time with her because this is making me uncomfortable. That's a boundary about your time and your energy. It's about us, right? And like kind of like an everyday example is if, your partner is calling you while you're at work. And so a boundary wouldn't be, you stop calling me while I'm at work. It would be, hey, I just want to let you know I can only talk during my lunch break. And so I will call you back then. It's talking about our time and what our capabilities are. That's how I think of it. And I find that to be relieving for both parties. Doesn't mean there's no agitation. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that, but it feels clear. It's just practicing clear,
Yeah.
direct communication, but it ain't
No,
easy.
and
That's for sure.
it's not hard. It's not easy. And to be fair, I felt really bad about the action that I was taking. But in retrospect, at no point did my roommate say, "Hey, I really miss our closeness, and I
Yeah.
can feel you finding other friends elsewhere, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
Can we talk
Yeah.
about it?" Right? So we never even had the conversation. We
Never
were
had the
just both
conversation.
completely avoidant, and in that
Yeah.
way, choices were made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
That's
I don't know.
hard
It's just
too. That's
yeah.
hard because sometimes I struggle with this, and I think it's a nuanced topic of when is it worth having a conversation and when is it not? And
Hmm.
it's a really challenging one because I think the question under that is, will the other person be able to hold it? Like if we're trying to, I've had many instances of like with a parent of like wanting to let them in on what I'm feeling, thinking they'll get it now, they'll understand. But sometimes they won't. Like there'll be defensiveness or, no, that's not true. Or, who knows how your roommate would have reacted like in that situation if you had the conversation. Regardless, though, whether you decide to have a conversation or not, the baseline is can I at least acknowledge and validate this emotion within myself?
Yeah.
If the other person, if I'm not going to have a conversation with my roommate or my parent or my friend, whatever, whoever the person is, okay, at least pause and say, I'm feeling angry because I feel like they're kind of going behind my back, or I feel like, you know, I'm not being heard. And can you validate that emotion within yourself? Because often I find if we're seeking a conversation with someone that has hurt us, we're trying to find validation. We're trying to get the person that hurt us to validate that they hurt us. But oftentimes I find that if the person was capable of hurting you in that way, they're probably not going to be capable of seeing it or
Right.
validating it. So if that's not an option, I believe you. That was hard. Like we can say
Hmm.
that to ourselves. The words that we're craving from the other person, we can say that to ourselves just to start, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't thought about this in, I don't know, 25 years or something, but it's interesting to
Yeah.
be like, oh, there's my lone wolf part of me too that was like, fine,
Yep.
you guys go off together. And they're still like incredibly close. To be fair, she probably made the right choice. And we're friendly. I mean, there's really no bad beef,
Yeah.
but I think it confirmed for me too, like I'm not worth closeness with me would not be worth fighting for, or the other will always get chosen. And I probably played that out or like looked for proof of that in my life.
Of course.
These
Of
are just
course.
that's just what I'm putting together in this moment.
I love that.
As
Thank
I,
you for sharing it. And
yeah,
I like how you said that. That is what happens if we have a core belief, I'm not worth fighting for, or like they're always going to choose the other person. If that's the core belief, we will find information to prove that to be true. And what's scary about the brain is then shut out information that disproves it. All the instances where you've been chosen or all the instances where someone fought for you, the brain isn't looking for that. And so that's why just acknowledging those beliefs is so important because then we can start to loosen our grip on them and maybe broaden and see, oh, but look at all the counter evidence as
yeah,
well, you know?
yeah. Well, and I think having empathy or sympathy or like compassion for ourselves
Yeah.
that wanting some sort of loyalty in that instance or a like singular devotion is a reasonable request. I think that's where I stumble. It's like none of my needs are valid. and not being able to sort of confirm for
Hmm.
myself, like, actually, I think that that would be a really reasonable, a
100%.
reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
And again, as you say, like, you might not get what you want, but you could define that as a value for yourself.
Might not get what you want from that relationship, but by
Right.
identifying that line or by identifying, oh, I actually, no, I really, this feels true to me. It opens up the possibility to find it somewhere else. But if
Right.
we are continuing to stay contorted and, oh, never mind, I guess that doesn't matter to me, we're never going to open ourselves to allowing that line to be okay.
Right.
We're closing
Well, and
ourselves, you know?
right. And I think so many women, and you write about this a bit in the book, but when they're looking for a partner or they're dating, right,
Yeah.
are accepting of all sorts of behaviors that
Yes.
are not are anathema to what they would expect in a future partner. I mean, I
Yep.
did this too. Like, you're trading off all
Totally.
sorts of things. I
Yep.
don't know why. It doesn't make rational sense when you're not
Uh-huh.
in lust or in love. But yeah, standing for those values and then taking in the information to be like, this just can't be my person.
Yeah, of
Unfortunately.
course. Think
Yeah.
underneath that it's usually, well, I don't deserve more than this. So if I want love, this has to be good enough for me. Oh, maybe I don't care about, if you're like if you really want a monogamous partner and they don't, you're like, maybe it's not important to me. Never mind or
Maybe
what
it's a ridiculous need. Right.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's we bend because we think maybe this is it. Maybe I can't do
Yeah.
better than this.
Totally.
And that's why I think reflecting on what those values and needs, whether it's romantic or friendship, relationship, reflecting on those while we're not in love, reflecting on it while we are in a grounded, steady place is really important so that we can, when we are in love or when we are feeling a bit more in the clouds, we can remind ourselves
Yeah.
what our past self reflected on.
Yes. I think that's a really good exercise. And I've
Hmm.
never done it, but like,
Hmm.
what are my values
Yeah.
for relationships?
Yeah.
What are my values for partnerships? What are my values for expectations at
Yeah.
work? I can only imagine. I mean, it would be hard, but worthwhile.
Yeah. I think to make it
Yeah.
easier and and even more importantly, what does it feel like? Because I think I see this with clients a lot, like it can get quite listy. Like, well, I want this and this, and it becomes kind of a checklist. And I think tapping more into the emotion of it. Well, it feels safe. It feels calm. It feels like I don't need to wonder where they are if they're not texting me back for 2 hours. How does it feel? Because it might look different. You may not be able to predict how it looks, but when we can tap into the emotion, that's what we want to remind ourselves of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Well, thank you for your work. Thank you for the book. It
Thank
is,
you.
it's great. And I can't wait to see what you do next. You're just
Thank
at the
you.
beginning.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and for reading the book. Like that just so means so much to me that you read
Of
it. So
course.
thank you.
Yes.
I really appreciate
Um,
it.
Always. I would never, I mean, it's like, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But I feel like interviewing people when you haven't, interviewing authors, I'm like, it's not respectful. Like, read the book, right?
I really appreciate it. It's very,
Yeah,
very
no,
thoughtful.
no, my pleasure. Okay. I will talk to you later.
Talk to you later, Elise. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I also meant to
Meg.
ask you, where are you based?
I'm in LA.
Oh, okay, cool. Sounds
Yeah.
good. So,
Also, it feels cold sometimes too, and nobody can understand it. My house has no insulation, so it's
oh
the
my
same temperature
gosh, yeah.
inside as outside. Yeah.
These rainy times, yeah, you need to
Yeah.
stay cozy.
So cold.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks,
All
Elise.
right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
I know my friend Holly Whitaker had the same response when this book came out. She was like, you have got to read this and talk to Meg. And on the first 2 pages of this book, she felt like she was flipping out because she felt so exposed and so seen. So I hear you if you're feeling that way about this conversation or about, are you mad at me? This is not something that I necessarily say out loud all the time, but I think it all the time. So, fellow fawners out there, I'm with you. I hear you. I see you. I relate and I celebrate our wisdom. And I also would love for us to learn how to do something new. All right, friends, I will see you next time. If you got something out of today's episode, I would so appreciate your help spreading the word about pulling the thread. Please rate and review the episode, subscribe to me here on YouTube. Um, and share this with a friend who you think might enjoy it. That's how we grow this thing. It's so helpful. So thank you. And if you want more in this world, please sign up for my weekly newsletter. You can just Google Elise Lunan and go to my site to sign up, eliselunan.com. And if you are interested in this world, you might really enjoy my book, On Our Best Behavior, The Price Women Pay to Be Good. There's also a workbook called Choosing Wholeness Over Goodness that goes with On Our Best Behavior. And then I also wrote True and False Magic with Phil Stutz, the legendary psychiatrist. You can also find that wherever you get your books. All right, I'll see you next time.